On July 12, 1963, 16-year-old Pauline Reed was walking to a dance near her home in Gorton, Manchester, when she encountered someone she recognized. Myra Hindley, a 20-year-old blonde woman who lived nearby, called out to her from a minivan. Hindley explained that she had lost her glove somewhere on Saddleworth Moor and asked if Pauline would help her look for it. It was a simple request from a familiar face, the kind of neighborly favor that happened countless times in working-class Manchester. Pauline agreed to help and climbed into the minivan, unaware that Ian Brady was following on his motorcycle and that she would never return home. What followed was the first murder in what would become known as the Moors murders, a series of child killings that would horrify Britain and transform our understanding of how evil can masquerade as love. This was the beginning of a killing spree that would claim 5 young lives between 1963 and 1965, carried out by a couple whose twisted relationship represented the dark side of romantic obsession. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley didn't just commit murder, they turned killing into a shared ritual that bonded them together in what became Britain's most notorious criminal partnership. The Moors murders case shattered Britain's post-war innocence and introduced the country to a new kind of evil, the idea that ordinary-looking people, even women, could be capable of the most heinous crimes against children. The 5 victims, Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey, and Edward Evans, were aged between 10 and 17, and at least 4 of them were sexually assaulted. What made this case particularly disturbing was not just the brutality of the murders, but the cold calculation with which they were carried out and the devotion that bound the 2 killers together. This was not a case of one dominant personality controlling a weak accomplice. Instead, it was a genuine partnership in evil, where both participants found fulfillment in their shared crimes. The story begins not with murder, but with what appeared to be an ordinary office romance. In January 1961, the 18-year-old Hindley joined Millwards as a typist. She soon became infatuated with Brady. Ian Brady was 22 years old, a stock clerk with a criminal record and a fascination with Nazi Germany and violent pornography. To most of his colleagues at Millwards, a small chemical distribution company in Manchester, Brady appeared unremarkable, quiet, intelligent, but antisocial. Myra Hindley, by contrast, was considered attractive and outgoing. She lived with her grandmother in Gorton and had been raised as a devout Catholic. Hindley began a diary and, although she had dates with other men, some of the entries detail her fascination with Brady, to whom she eventually spoke for the first time on 27 July. Her diary entries from this period reveal the beginning of an obsession that would ultimately consume her entire identity. For months, Hindley wrote about Brady in her diary, recording his every word and analyzing his behavior toward her. She transformed herself to appeal to him, abandoning her Catholic faith, bleaching her hair blonde, and adopting the leather-clad Germanic appearance he found attractive. When 22 December, when he asked her on a date to the cinema, Hindley believed she had achieved her greatest ambition. The relationship that developed between Brady and Hindley was unlike anything either had experienced before. Brady, who had struggled with relationships throughout his life, found in Hindley someone completely devoted to him, willing to adopt his interests and beliefs without question. Hindley, for her part, discovered a sense of purpose and identity through her complete submission to Brady's will. Brady introduced Hindley to his collection of books on Nazi Germany, particularly those dealing with torture and the Holocaust. He shared his violent fantasies and his belief that conventional morality was meaningless. Most disturbing of all, he began to discuss the possibility of committing the perfect murder, killing someone who would not be missed and whose body would never be found. What transformed these discussions from fantasy into reality was Brady's growing confidence that Hindley would participate in his crimes rather than betray him. He tested her loyalty gradually, first involving her in petty theft from their employer, then in increasingly serious criminal activities. Each test Hindley passed reinforced Brady's belief that she could be trusted with his ultimate secret, his desire to kill. The transformation of their relationship from romance to criminal partnership culminated in the summer of 1963 with the murder of Pauline Reed. Once on Saddleworth Moor, Brady beat and sexually assaulted Reed before slitting her throat to the bone. The murder was carried out with meticulous planning. Hindley would lure victims using her non-threatening appearance as a young woman, while Brady would follow and commit the actual killings. The choice of Saddleworth Moor as their burial ground was deliberate and revealing. The moor, located between Manchester and Yorkshire, was a desolate expanse of peat bog and rocky outcrops where bodies could be buried with little chance of discovery. Brady and Hindley had explored the area extensively during their courtship, photographing each other among the rocks and valleys that would later become grave sites. After murdering Pauline Reed, Brady and Hindley returned home and behaved as if nothing had happened. They went to work the next day, maintained their normal routines, and gave no sign that they had just committed murder. This ability to compartmentalize their crimes and continue normal lives would become a hallmark of their killing spree. 4 months later, on November 23, 1963, they struck again. 12-year-old John Kilbride was abducted from Ashton Market using the same missing glove ruse that had worked with Pauline Reed. Hindley approached the boy and asked him to help her load some boxes into her minivan in exchange for a bottle of sherry. John, trusting the well-dressed young woman, agreed to help and was driven to Saddleworth Moor, where Brady was waiting. The murder of John Kilbride revealed the increasingly ritualistic nature of Brady and Hindley's crimes. They photographed each other on the moor near where they buried their victims, creating a secret record of their crimes that only they could understand. These photographs would later prove crucial evidence, but at the time they served as private trophies that reinforced the bond between the killers. The 7-month gap between their second and third murders demonstrated the killers' patience and self-control. Unlike many serial killers who accelerate their activities under psychological pressure, Brady and Hindley were able to wait until they found a perfect opportunity. This calculated approach made them far more dangerous than impulsive killers, as it allowed them to plan meticulously and avoid detection. On June 16, 1964, a year after they'd murdered Reed, Myra Hindley and Ian Brady abducted 12-year-old Keith Bennett on his way to his grandmother's house. Keith was walking alone when Hindley offered him a lift, claiming she was going in the same direction. The boy accepted, unaware that Brady was following in another vehicle. Keith Bennett's murder followed the same pattern as the previous killings: abduction by Hindley using a pretext, transport to Saddleworth Moor, sexual assault and murder by Brady, and burial in the peat bog. However, this crime would prove different from the others in one crucial way: Keith's body has never been found despite decades of searching. The inability to locate Keith's remains has caused additional anguish for his family and represents the one unsolved element of the Moors murders case. The killer's most horrific crime occurred on December 26, 1964, Boxing Day. On the afternoon of Boxing Day 1964, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey disappeared from a local fairground. Leslie Ann was the youngest victim, and her murder introduced a new element of documented torture that would later shock the nation when audio recordings were played in court. Unlike their previous victims, Leslie Ann was taken to Hindley's house rather than directly to the moor. Brady and Hindley forced the terrified child to pose for pornographic photographs while recording her pleas for mercy on a tape recorder. The audio recording, which captured Leslie Ann begging to go home to her mother, became one of the most harrowing pieces of evidence ever presented in a British courtroom. After torturing and photographing Leslie Ann, Brady and Hindley strangled her and buried her body on Saddleworth Moor. The decision to document this murder so extensively revealed the killer's growing confidence and their desire to preserve their crimes for later re-experiencing. It also demonstrated how their shared sadism had escalated from simple murder to prolonged torture. By 1965, Brady and Hindley had established a routine that allowed them to commit murder while maintaining their normal lives. Brady continued working at Millwards while Hindley had moved to a new job with a construction company. They lived together at Hindley's grandmother's house in Hattersley, where they appeared to neighbors as an unremarkable young couple. The psychological dynamic between Brady and Hindley had evolved during their killing spree. What had begun as Hindley's infatuation with Brady had developed into a genuine partnership in evil. Both derived satisfaction from their crimes, though in different ways. Brady from the act of killing itself, and Hindley from her role as the enabler who made the murders possible. Their final murder on October 6, 1965, broke their established pattern and ultimately led to their downfall. Edward Evans, a 17-year-old homosexual, was lured to Hindley's house from a Manchester pub. Unlike their previous victims, Evans was killed inside the house rather than on the moor, and the murder was witnessed by Hindley's brother-in-law, David Smith. The inclusion of David Smith as a witness represented a fatal error in judgment by Brady. Brady had hoped to recruit Smith as an accomplice, believing that witnessing a murder would implicate him and ensure his silence. Instead, Smith was horrified by what he saw, and despite his initial shock and fear, eventually contacted the police. Smith later testified that he watched Brady kill Edward Evans with an axe, striking him repeatedly while Hindley watched calmly and offered encouragement. After Evans was dead, Brady and Hindley discussed where to bury the body, treating the murder as a routine task. Smith's testimony provided authorities with their first inside account of how the couple actually committed their crimes. The police investigation that followed Smith's report was swift and thorough. When officers searched Hindley's house, they found Edward Evans's body wrapped in plastic sheeting and stored in a bedroom. They also discovered the prayer book that contained the left luggage tickets for Manchester Central Station, where Brady and Hindley had stored their collection of pornographic photographs and audio recordings. The discovery of the photographs proved to be the breakthrough investigators needed. Among the images were photographs of Brady and Hindley on Saddleworth Moor, some taken at locations where bodies were later discovered. The photographs also included the horrific images of Leslie Ann Downey being tortured, providing undeniable evidence of the couple's involvement in multiple murders. On May 6, 1966, Brady was found guilty of the murders of Leslie Ann Downey, John Kilbride, and Edward Evans, while Hindley was found guilty of the murders of Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans, and also for harboring Brady in the knowledge that he had killed John Kilbride. Both received life sentences, which in 1966 still carried the possibility of eventual release. The trial of Brady and Hindley was one of the most sensational in British legal history. The evidence presented, particularly the audio recording of Leslie Ann Downey's torture and murder, shocked the public and established the case as a benchmark for evil. The image of Hindley, blonde and seemingly ordinary, became iconic in British criminal history as proof that monsters could hide behind normal appearances. During their imprisonment, Brady and Hindley's relationship began to deteriorate. Initially, they maintained contact and continued to profess their devotion to each other. However, as the years passed and the possibility of release became a factor, their approaches to their situation diverged significantly. Hindley eventually claimed that she had been completely under Brady's control during the murders and that she was essentially another victim of his manipulation. She underwent a religious conversion, returning to the Catholic faith she had abandoned for Brady, and began a campaign for release based on her claims of rehabilitation and remorse. Brady, by contrast, never expressed genuine remorse for the murders and seemed to take pride in his notoriety. He refused to cooperate with efforts to locate Keith Bennett's body and appeared to enjoy the power he held over the families of his victims. His attitude toward the murders remained consistent with his original belief that conventional morality was meaningless. The question of whether Hindley was truly a willing participant or a manipulated victim became central to debates about her case. Supporters argued that she had been young and impressionable when she met Brady, and that he had systematically corrupted her through psychological manipulation. Critics countered that her active participation in luring victims and her apparent enjoyment of the crimes proved she was an equal partner in evil. In 1987, after years of maintaining their innocence regarding additional murders, Brady and Hindley finally confessed to killing Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett. This confession was prompted by investigators who had developed new evidence linking them to these earlier disappearances. The confession led to new searches of Saddleworth Moor, resulting in the discovery of Pauline Reed's remains. The recovery of Pauline Reed's body, nearly 25 years after her murder, provided some closure for her family, but also reignited public interest in the case. The extensive search operations on Saddleworth Moor became media spectacles, with Brady and Hindley occasionally brought to the moor to assist in locating burial sites. Despite numerous searches involving advanced technology and detailed geological surveys, Keith Bennett's body has never been found. His disappearance remains the one unsolved element of the Moors murders case and continues to cause anguish for his family. Brady took the secret of Keith's burial location to his grave, refusing to provide information that might have brought closure to the Bennett family. The case had a profound impact on British society and popular culture. It challenged assumptions about women and violence, demonstrated the dangers of folie à deux relationships, and highlighted the vulnerability of children to predators who appeared trustworthy. The image of Myra Hindley became synonymous with female evil in the British consciousness. The Moors murders also influenced criminal investigation techniques and child protection practices. The case demonstrated the importance of interagency cooperation in missing person cases and led to improved methods for searching large outdoor crime scenes. The extensive documentation left by the killers also provided valuable insights into the psychology of serial killer partnerships. From a criminological perspective, the Brady-Hindley partnership represented a unique form of serial killing, one where two people with complementary psychological needs created a killing team that was more dangerous than either would have been individually. Their case helped establish the concept of team killers and provided insights into how such partnerships develop and sustain themselves. Myra Hindley's repeated applications for parole became a source of ongoing controversy throughout her imprisonment. Despite claims of rehabilitation and religious conversion, she was never released, and on November 15, 2002, Myra Hindley dies in prison, ending decades of debate about whether she deserved a second chance. Ian Brady's later years in prison were marked by mental health issues and a prolonged legal battle over his right to die. He went on hunger strike multiple times and was eventually declared mentally ill and transferred to a secure hospital. He has been tube-fed ever since, maintaining his hunger strike as a form of control over his circumstances. Brady died in 2017, taking his secrets about Keith Bennett's burial location with him. The families of the victims continued to be affected by the crimes decades later. The parents and siblings of the murdered children became unwilling public figures, campaigning for justice and opposing Hindley's release applications. Their dignity in the face of unimaginable loss became as much a part of the story as the crimes themselves. The search for Keith Bennett's remains continues even today, driven by his family's need for closure and advances in forensic archaeology. Each new search operation brings renewed media attention to the case and fresh anguish for all the families involved. The failure to locate Keith's body remains a final victory for the killers over their victims. The Moors murders case established templates for understanding serial killer partnerships and the psychology of shared delusion that remain relevant today. The relationship between Brady and Hindley demonstrated how two people with complementary psychological needs could create something more terrible than the sum of their individual pathologies. Their story also serves as a warning about the dangers of romantic obsession taken to extremes. What began as Hindley's infatuation with Brady evolved into a folie à deux that transformed both participants into killers. The case shows how love itself can be corrupted when it becomes the foundation for shared criminality rather than mutual growth and support. Today, the Moors murders remain Britain's most notorious serial killer case, not just because of the brutality of the crimes, but because of what they revealed about the capacity for evil that can exist within seemingly ordinary relationships. The rolling hills of Saddleworth Moor, where 5 young people were buried by 2 people who claimed to love each other, stand as a permanent reminder that the greatest monsters are often those who appear most human. The case of Brady and Hindley proves that evil is not always a solitary phenomenon. Sometimes it requires partnership, devotion, and what the killers themselves mistook for love. Their crimes remain a testament to the darkest possibilities of human relationships and a warning that the line between love and obsession, between devotion and destruction, can be terrifyingly thin.